Welcome to the channel, guys. We are back again. Today I'm going to be talking about Allure Homme Sport Cologne, so stay tuned for that. And if you like top 10 lists, fragrance reviews, cologne comparisons, and first impressions, hit that subscribe button for more great content. So recently I picked up Allure Homme Sport, the original, and I do really like that one, but one that I haven't heard a ton about from the line as well as that one is Allure Homme Sport Cologne. So this one is a little bit different. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. This one comes in a clear bottle, so it is definitely, it looks a little bit different if you actually see it instead of the sort of silver bottle that Allure Homme Sport has. And this one is definitely a much fresher take on that DNA. And in fact, I think it smells a lot different. And trying this one out, I think it's one that should probably be talked about a little bit more with respect to this line. I guess it is a little bit of an older fragrance, so sometimes these fall by the wayside, but to me this is a bit of an underrated gem from Chanel and from the line of Allure. So without further ado, let's get into the review. So when this one opens up, I do get a huge burst of really beautiful citrus notes. So there's lemon and there's orange. There is, I think, bergamot in there, but I don't really pick it out. The lemon comes off really nice, crisp. Doesn't smell at all like cleaning product, which I find a lot of times lemon, even in high quality fragrances, can have a bit of a tendency to do that just because there is sort of this scent association, I think, with Pledge and other things like that. But what I actually get is a little bit of a lemonade vibe. And it is actually quite crisp. Slightly even aquatic feeling, so it does have that a little bit of that watery feel, and so it does come off really nice. But what I actually find that I get a little bit or more crisply than the lemon is the orange. So I think there's orange and mandarin orange in this one, and it comes off as this really nice, bright, juicy orangey vibe, and it is really quite nicely done. So it really has this really uplifting big sort of burst of citrus. The orange also is slightly zesty, so if you're familiar with Allure Homme Sport, there is also a bit of a zesty orange. I would say this one is slightly zestier, but not much. To me, it's not to the level of the sort of tart zestiness that you get with Terre d'Hermès, especially the Eau Très Fraîche, but that sort of bright juiciness that the Eau Très Fraîche has, that is so sort of juicy that it's almost watery, this also has. So actually, honestly, it does have some similarities with that fragrance. Now, the other note that's really strong in here for me is the neroli. Now, the neroli is not, for me, I find that a lot of neroli fragrances, like if you look at wood neroli, neroli portofino, those types of fragrances that are heavy neroli, they have a neroli that feels a little bit prickly. To me, I don't really get the whole prickly vibe, but it does come off as a slightly almost floral kind of neroli vibe that is certainly there. And it is actually quite present. I would say it is the second strongest, in fact. So there are the citruses. Those are the dominant note for the first 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. And then to me, it's a lot about the lemon and the neroli. So as this one, transitions into that mid phase, you definitely start to get, there is a little bit more of that lemonade-y vibe. But I know a lot of people have compared this to like Dior Homme Cologne, and a lot of people have said that this one does have a lot of that lemonade-y vibe. I don't get a ton of it. It is certainly there to some degree, and for maybe 15, 20 minutes. But after that, it really definitely comes out as more of a citrusy neroli fragrance. And as it dries down even more, there's still this sort of fresh, uplifting vibe that it has with that neroli, and the vetiver starts to play in a little bit more. And actually, I really start to get that vetiver base a little bit more into the mid. And it's a clean vetiver, so this isn't smoky or dirty or earthy at all. It is actually a really nice, clean vetiver. And when this one, to me, completely dries down, what you get is a bit of an airy, fresh, soapy vibe. Not overly soapy, maybe a little bit more towards the Mugler Cologne variety of soapiness, where it does certainly have this fresh, clean, soapy vibe, but not super thick, soapy, full-on bar of soap vibe. But very similar, I guess, in characteristic to that. And I'm going to say that I'm actually a little bit surprised. I'm surprised because the performance of this is actually quite good for the type of fragrance that it is. I mean, it's not really good, but it is actually not bad. So it is a fresher fragrance, lots of citruses, neroli, and that kind of soapy vetiver. And those don't often last a long time, but this one to me, in between that 6 to 8 hour mark, which is not overly dreadful, but especially, given the types of situations I would wear this in, which are largely going out, especially on a really hot day, and maybe playing a sport or doing something else out in the sun, because it has that very fresh, clean vibe, and it's going to keep that going for the entire duration. In those types of situations, I find 6 hours is usually more than enough. Like, I'm not usually outside playing sports for hours or whatever. And so, for me anyways, I think that the longevity in general for what I would typically wear it for is good. Projection, it actually has some solid sillage for the first hour and a half. And it does definitely tone down a lot more. So this is one that, again, like Allure Homme Sport, is not a projection beast by any means. It does have, decent projection. It does have a little bit of sillage, but it isn't really loud. It is definitely a little bit more subtle. And after that, hour and a half, it does sit a lot closer to the skin. And given that, to me, this is one that I would mostly do when I'm going outside, I think like the perfect situation is really those sporty situations, or when you're going to be out in the hot sun. And especially if you're outside, this is one that I would feel bad about spraying more of, which is going to give it a little bit more projection and a little bit better or stronger longevity, where it's not going to sit quite so close to the skin for that 6 to 8 hours. And I think that's kind of, at least in my opinion, the way to do this one. Very good for those types of situations. Nice, clean fragrance. And I think if you want, or like those kinds of, wood neroli Portofino, but you want something with a little bit more of a different spin on that I think this is actually quite good. So, like I said, neroli very strong, but it has a really nice, interesting citrus opening. I do kind of wish that lemonade vibe that I get a little bit in the opening was there longer. I wish that nice, juicy, zesty orange was, again, zestier and stayed longer. I think the only fragrance that I can think of that has really, really long-lasting, zesty orange is Terre d'Hermes Eau Très Fraîche. And so if you really like that vibe, that's obviously one to go for. But even in respect of the Eau Très Fraîche, I think that if you like that vibe, this is one that's different. But a similar idea. I think the vetiver in this one's a lot cleaner and soapier, whereas I think in Eau Très Fraîche it does have a sort of a fresh woodiness, but it doesn't have the same sort of soapiness that this one has. And so definitely different, but in a sort of similar vein. And again, like I said, this is one that I'm really tempted to also pick up for the summer. So I got Allure Homme Sport. And I think the big thing is if I was going to buy another Chanel, it would either be this or like Egoist or Platinum Egoist. And I'm trying to think, do I really want to buy another fragrance that I just bought one? But I think this is definitely in contention for my favorite of the Allure line. It's between this one and Allure Homme Sport. But the cologne is definitely much better suited for the summer, whereas I think Allure Homme Sport is a little bit more of a spring fragrance. It works still in the summer, but it does have a little bit of a sort of thick sweetness that this one doesn't have. And so this one is definitely for the high heat, and I think that's where it definitely shines. And one that, for the upcoming summer, especially if you're in a hotter temperature, this is going to be an underrated gem that a lot of people are not wearing. And it seems to be one that isn't talked about, but I think it's one that's definitely going to make my list. But anyways, I think I'm going to cut the video there. Allure Homme Sport cologne. Excellent fragrance, not really talked about. Does have a nice lemonade-y vibe with beautiful orange and neroli and vetiver. So I would recommend checking out if you like those types of notes. But, let me know in the comments down below, is there anything from a designer house especially that you think is overlooked by a lot of people, an underrated or hidden gem from the brand? Leave a comment down below, and, I'm looking for those types of fragrances. Would love to check some out and do some reviews. So do let me know which ones you love. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next video.